A lone cowboy saved a dying Apache woman, risking everything. But what her tribe did next will shock you. From fear to respect, this true frontier-style story proves one act of kindness can change destiny forever. Watch till the end to see what happened next. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. The sun hung mercilessly over the vast American frontier, casting long waves of heat across the cracked earth. In this harsh land, survival was never guaranteed, and mercy was often seen as weakness. The lone cowboy had spent years learning that lesson the hard way. Every ride across the dry plains was a test of endurance, where even the smallest mistake could cost a life. Yet on this particular day, something felt different. As his horse moved steadily through the silent landscape, his eyes caught a shape lying still in the distance, half buried in dust and shadow. At first, he thought it might be nothing more than debris carried by the wind, but as he drew closer, his instincts sharpened. The shape was human. His grip tightened on the reins as a sense of unease settled in his chest. When he finally reached the figure, he saw her clearly, an Apache woman, her clothes torn, her body marked by injury and exhaustion. She looked as though she had been abandoned by both people and fate. For a brief moment, he hesitated, knowing exactly what this could mean for him. The tension between settlers and Apache tribes was no secret. Stories of violence and retaliation had traveled far and wide, shaping fear into a constant companion. Helping her could be seen as betrayal by some, or as a threat by others. He imagined what might happen if her tribe found him with her, misunderstanding his intentions, acting without hesitation. It would be his life on the line. The desert wind carried that warning clearly, as if urging him to ride away and forget what he had seen. But something deeper held him in place. Perhaps it was the simple truth that she was helpless, caught between life and death, with no one else around. Or maybe it was a part of him he had tried to bury long ago, the part that still believed in doing what was right, even when it was dangerous. He exhaled slowly, as if releasing his doubts into the dry air, and made his decision. Carefully, he dismounted and moved toward her, each step carrying the weight of risk and responsibility. Lifting her was not easy. She was weak, her body limp and unresponsive, yet he could feel the faint warmth of life still within her. He placed her gently across his horse, making sure not to worsen her injuries. Every movement was cautious, deliberate. As he mounted again, he glanced once more at the empty horizon, aware that anyone could be watching. Then, without wasting another second, he turned his horse toward his cabin, miles away, but now more important than ever before. Journey back was slow and tense. The sun showed no mercy, and the land offered no comfort. He kept his eyes scanning the distance, alert for any sign of movement. His thoughts raced with uncertainty. Had he just saved a life or signed his own fate? There was no way to know. All he could do was keep moving forward, step by step, trusting the choice he had made. The rhythm of the horse's hooves became the only sound breaking the silence around them. When he finally reached his cabin, exhaustion weighed heavily on him, but there was no time to rest. He carried her inside, laying her down with care. The small space offered little, but it was shelter, and for now that was enough. He gathered what supplies he had, water, cloth, simple remedies, and began tending to her wounds. Each action was guided by urgency, yet filled with quiet determination. He wasn't a doctor, but he knew enough to keep someone alive if given the chance. Days passed slowly, blending into one another. He barely slept, dividing his time between watching over her and keeping the outside world at a distance. At times, he wondered if anyone was searching for her. The thought lingered like a shadow, but he pushed it aside. His focus remained on the fragile life before him. Little by little, signs of recovery began to appear, a slight movement, a steadier breath, a hint of color returning to her face. Then one evening, as the light faded into dusk, her eyes finally opened. At first, there was only fear, sharp and instinctive, as she struggled to understand where she was. The cowboy stepped back slightly, giving her space, his expression calm but cautious. Confusion followed, her gaze moving around the unfamiliar room, and then, as her eyes met his, something shifted. The fear softened, replaced by a quiet awareness of what had been done for her. In that silent moment, no words were needed. The distance between them remained, shaped by history and difference, but something else had taken root, a fragile connection built on a single act of compassion. The cowboy didn't expect gratitude, nor did he seek recognition. He had done what he believed was right, nothing more. Yet deep down, he sensed that this choice, made in the middle of nowhere, would not simply fade away like footprints in the dust. The morning she left was quiet, almost too quiet for a goodbye that carried so much weight. The Apache woman stood at the edge of the clearing, her strength finally restored, her presence no longer fragile. She didn't speak, and the cowboy didn't try to stop her. Some things didn't need words. He simply watched as she turned and walked toward the open land, her figure growing smaller with every step, until she disappeared into the endless horizon. He told himself that was the way it was meant to be, two lives crossing briefly, then returning to their separate worlds once again. For the next few days, life returned to its familiar rhythm. The cowboy repaired fences, checked supplies, and tried to focus on the routine that had once defined his existence. Yet something felt different. The silence around his cabin no longer felt the same. It carried a sense of anticipation, as if the land itself was waiting. He often caught himself looking toward the direction she had gone, wondering if she had reached her people safely. But he pushed those thoughts aside, reminding himself that his part in her story was over. Then came the morning that shattered that illusion. The first sound was distant but unmistakable, the rhythmic pounding of hooves against the dry earth. It grew louder with each passing second, cutting through the stillness like a warning. The cowboy froze for a brief moment, his instincts immediately taking over. He stepped outside, his eyes scanning the horizon. What he saw made his heart sink. A group of Apache warriors, riding with purpose, closing in on his cabin from every direction. There was no escape. He knew it the moment he saw them. Running would only make things worse. Standing his ground was the only choice left. 1,000 thoughts rushed through his mind in an instant. Had they come for revenge? Did they believe he had harmed her instead of helping? In this land, misunderstandings could be deadly. He took a slow breath, steadying himself as the riders surrounded his home. Dust swirled in the air, and the tension was thick enough to feel. The warriors dismounted, their presence strong and unyielding. Their eyes were fixed on him, unreadable but intense. The cowboy stepped forward, keeping his hands visible, showing no sign of aggression. He was prepared for anything, even the worst. In that moment he accepted the possibility that his decision to help might cost him everything. Yet he didn't regret it. Not even now. There was a quiet resolve in him, a willingness to face whatever came next without fear or apology. Then something unexpected happened. From behind the line of warriors, a familiar figure emerged. The woman he had saved stepped forward, her posture calm but commanding. She looked different now, stronger, grounded, no longer the broken figure he had found in the desert. The warriors turned their attention to her as she began to speak. Her voice carried authority, and though the cowboy couldn't understand her words, he could feel their meaning in the shift of energy around him. The tension began to dissolve. The warriors, who had stood ready, their bodies rigid with suspicion, slowly relaxed. Their expressions softened, and the weight of hostility lifted from the air. One by one, weapons were lowered. The cowboy watched in disbelief, trying to make sense of what was unfolding before him. It was clear now, she was telling them the truth. She was telling them what he had done, how he had chosen compassion when it would have been easier to walk away. Silence followed her words, but it was no longer threatening. It was filled with understanding. The leader of the group stepped forward, his presence commanding respect. He studied the cowboy for a long moment, as if measuring not just his actions, but the kind of man he was. Then, in a gesture that spoke louder than any words, he lowered his head slightly. It was not submission, but acknowledgement. Respect. Something the cowboy had never expected to receive in such a way. What came next changed everything. Instead of punishment or hostility, the warriors extended something far more powerful: acceptance. They made it clear, through gestures and quiet actions, that he was no longer seen as an enemy. He was someone who had shown honor, someone worthy of trust. They offered him protection, a rare and meaningful gesture in a land where alliances were not easily given. But beyond that, there was something deeper, a sense that he now belonged, at least in part, to something greater than himself. The cowboy stood there, overwhelmed by the turn of events. Just days ago, he had been alone, living a life defined by isolation and survival. Now, because of a single choice, everything had shifted. The line that once divided him from them had blurred. He realized that kindness, even in the harshest of places, carried a power that went beyond fear and conflict. It had the ability to build bridges where none seemed possible. As the warriors prepared to leave, the woman met his eyes one last time. There was no need for words, only a shared understanding. He had saved her life, and in return, she had changed his. Watching them ride away, the cowboy felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, not just relief, but a sense of purpose. In a world shaped by struggle, his small act of humanity had rewritten his destiny in a way he never could have imagined.